classic leadership mistake is to sell your own vision rather than working with others to build a genuinely shared vision. We asked leaders in development to share some of the lessons that they have learned.
Not so long ago, I was in exactly that situation. I was given the task of creating a new monitoring system to be implemented across 4 different countries. And also given quite a short time frame in which to give it. And so at the time I was convinced that I was being quite consultative and so on, but at the same time I had a clear vision in my own mind about how this should work. And given the short time frames, then I made a few shortcuts, really pushed hard to get the result that I was expecting to get. And then once we actually arrived at a product and went to implement across these 4 historically quite independent country operations, then received a lot of pushback, a lot of resistance, a lot of sort of passive avoidance and so on, and really had to almost take the whole project back to the beginning. So really what happened was that whilst I believe myself to being consultative, really when I look back I was pushing to meet deadlines as my key driver, and as I said, making really decisions on behalf of the group, assuming that they were coming along with it and affirming those decisions, and really it just did not work, and that actually set the process back several months. So I think next time if I was in the same position again, there's a couple of things I would have done differently. One is with my own managers who are dictating the timeline, actually negotiate with them to help them understand the time pressures around trying to do something like that that requires a lot of consultation and negotiating a longer time frame and better understanding. The second is certainly to take more time, and I'd say both spend more times behind the scenes one-on-ones with the stakeholders, as well as the group dynamics, as well as bringing people together to try and reach consensus. Now, a third strategy I would do differently next time, I think, comes from the realisation that in fact when things started getting bogged down and not moving ahead, it wasn't entirely from the direct stakeholders that I was working with. It was actually a number of indirect stakeholders within those offices that they had to work with, kind of gatekeepers around their own actions, country directors and operations directors and so on. So it made me realise that next time I'd be much smarter in spending a lot more time behind the scenes building consensus, not just with the immediate actors, but with the wider community of stakeholders who really influence the implementer's ability to implement, and those who are ultimately going to have to live with the results as well.
Yes, this mistake was made by a government agency developing an agricultural project for a community of smallholder farmers. And normally with this kind of project, it is expected that all stakeholders will be involved so that their ideas, their concerns and input will be made into the final project outcome. This was not the case. The location of the area for the project was a decision by government. Other stakeholders who also had money were also decisive on certain decisions that they had to take. At the end of the day, although the project was made, the smallholder farmers who were the beneficiaries for the project were not willing to be part of it because they were not involved from the beginning to the end. So for me, if I have to do something differently, one of the stakeholders I wouldn't actually take out is the smallholder farmers because they are the beneficiaries. The project is for them and its sustainability depends on them to a large extent. Having left them out, they felt it was an imposition on their rights, and for that reason, they were not willing to have anything to do with the project.
I can give an example. The one I'm going to use is the Queensland Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Foundation. It's a foundation that was set up in 2008 by the Queensland Government, and it was set up with $33 million of Aboriginal people's stolen wages that was held in trust by the Queensland Government. So I think the fact that they were stolen wages created an enormous sensitivity around the government's decision, and probably one that I underestimated at the time. But the reason the foundation was set up was because it would retain the money in perpetuity, but the earnings of it would be used for Indigenous scholarships. And I believed in that so much because I had the benefit of a scholarship myself that allowed me to finish school, go to university and do things that nobody else in my family were able to do. So I had the vision for education. I agreed philosophically with the approach, but some of the other members who were appointed to the board, I think, had different views, and understandably so now, particularly in hindsight, about the stolen wages, the way in which we needed to engage with the ongoing dialogue around it, and may not have been as sold on the idea of scholarships as I was. So navigating my way through being chair of that board and getting everybody towards a shared vision and letting go of mine a little bit, stepping back from that in order to move that forward was a really big challenge at the time. And over a 2-year period of some fairly tumultuous times, we were able to land in a place where we had a scholarship program in place. Now, 8 years later, we've awarded more than 3,500 scholarships to Indigenous young people in Queensland. So I think that represents a shared vision, but something that had a very, very difficult start.
Shared vision is really, really important, and I believe I cannot overemphasize the significance of it. If you want to tap people's aspiration, if you want to build on their talents and, if you want to involve them, you really have to provide a shared vision. Let me give you an example. So many years ago, we were doing this development project, and it was a health and hygiene project. It was done in a really underdeveloped area where people were so poor that they had to rely on open defecation. They did not have toilets in their houses. So we thought, and we assumed, it's really important that we assumed on their behalf that since they do not have the money or the resources to make a toilet, if we make it for them, they're going to be so happy, and it would be a really good thing to do. So it was our vision. We went to that community with our vision, spent about $0.5 million, and when we constructed some 1,000 toilets in that community. And after a year, when we did an evaluation, we learned that less than 10% people are actually using those toilets. So by all means, that project was a failure. So we did a qualitative study and we had our lessons. And the second time when we repeated the same project in another community, this time we worked really close with the people. We had street theaters, we had sessions, information sessions in schools and communities, and we made sure that everybody knows what is the significance of safe sanitation practice. And then we did a combined vision building exercise with those communities. And this time when we built toilets for them, they also contributed a very small share, but they were happy to contribute in that as well. And this time when we did a qualitative study, an evaluation, we learned that the adoption rate was more than 90%. It was, over the top of my head, it was something 93%. So, a really good example that shows that how, building a shared vision is really important to reach somewhere.
So the example that I have is not of my own, but I can say my line manager at that time. So this was just a year ago while I was working in the US for an international development agency. I was working as a consultant. But though I was not full-time employed, but I was full-time on one project that we were managing in Tajikistan. And the issue of the supervisor was that rather than informing me and mentoring me in how to complete this task. Because I was new with the organization, I didn't know about their background, I was just a consultant. But there was no effort made to bring me on board, to treat me as an equal, and to build, like it says, a shared vision. If we are trying to accomplish a certain project, and this was related to US government funding, so it was something very significant, and we didn't have that much time. But the vision of the supervisor was very limited, and his entire focus was to keep us just on the task at hand. And I had a contract with him for at least 6 to 8 months, so I expected more of an ownership and initiation into the organization rather than just being pushed into doing certain tasks. And I would say that is something that I have also learned as a supervisor in different parts of the world, that you need to mentor and bring people on board as a team before pushing them into a certain task or pushing them into completing a certain project, which would be required at some point in time where you have to accomplish a project and you have to meet those deadlines. But the first step, and to achieve a shared vision, it is to start from the beginning as a team and to bring on board people as a team rather than immediately pushing them into what you think is the right way to accomplish a task or a project.